Hello friends, Marty McConnell here again, the off-grid gecko, and today I'm going to show you how to turn this into one of these. Now this is basically a mallet. It's kind of a bushcraft mallet, so call them my little bashers, and these things come in handy for a lot of things. I'm actually going to be using it today to make this guy instead of beating on it with another log, which I would probably do if I was out in the bush. And I've got me a little stump here, and the log is saw cut, so this would be more like if you're using your silky to bust off a piece of wood, or if you have a saw with you with an axe, it'd take a little more time to square up the ends a little bit, or you could always just leave them rounded off, because this is tapered right here. It's not a big deal. But anyways, that's the trick. Now this one looks kind of more like you've probably seen in a lot of videos if you watch a lot of bushcraft stuff, which if you're watching my channel you probably do. This was actually my first attempt at one, and so on this one I slimmed the handle down basically by taking my axe and just cutting away all this excess material on the end. It took a lot longer to actually make it this way than it did to do it the way I'm going to show you today, because of reasons and things. But enough of that. That guy's been retired now, so I needed a new basher, and I made this guy, which is actually lighter, and I kind of like it better actually. If you can find a piece of dried wood, that's best for this, because when the wood dries it hardens up to a certain degree, and if you can find a piece that's dried without cracking, like that ideally is going to be your best bet. This is just a log off the firewood pile over there. So the first thing that you want to do, I'll cut right into it. I wish I had a thing to put this on. Is you want to take a look at the log and get an idea which end's going to be the basher and which end's going to be the handle. Now in this case it's easy to determine with this one because this is the fat end, so I want all the weight down on the end to be my basher. So I'm just going to go ahead and start stripping off some bark with the old hatchet here. And when it comes to this, it's pretty simple stuff. A lot of it's just repetitive, so probably actually stop the camera here for a minute while I do this. And I'm not actually cutting into the wood, I'm just stripping the bark off. Now this is a piece of oak, so the bark's really thick. I would say about an inch thick all the way around, so this is going to be a lot smaller than what it looks like right now. But the first step's peeling the bark off so you can actually see what you're working with, and you don't accidentally do anything silly on the upcoming steps. So, and it's a simple matter of, if you can do it in the shade where you're not in direct sunlight like I am, it's probably better. And all you want to do is just swing your axe nice and ginger, and you got to cut into it a little bit. You can't like shave all this off like it's a draw knife. You have to have the axe or the hatchet angled in, and then what it'll do is it'll catch a piece and it'll blow the rest of it off. So I'm going to start by doing that, pause the video, and then I'll come back when I've got all this bark off, because it's going to take a minute and it's boring. Okay, I'm back. So now that that's done, I got my little end down here, I got my big end up here. This isn't cut off perfectly straight, but I really don't care. That little extra weight's not going to make a difference. And usually these are made round. I'm actually half tempted to put a flat side on this just for finer working. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that'll get the basic idea across. Where's my thing, kitty? Ugh. So, this is an optional step. It's just something I like, having a flat side every once in a while to beat on stuff with. So what I'm going to do is line my axe up here on the side that I want to make flat, and just go ahead and get him in there. And then when you do this, I've found it's best to kind of hold this at an angle where if the axe comes loose, it's going to slip down and it's not going to go into your leg. So if you hold it like sideways like this rather than holding it straight on where it'll drop straight down, that's better when you start beating on it. And we're just going to kind of run this guy through here. And probably be better if I had a actual axe instead of this little thing, but whatever works, right? Now, there's something happening here that may not be exactly clear to all you kids at home, but you will notice my split did not run the entire length of the log, and this is called run out. So when you start splitting with an axe on an off angle, you're going to get that tendency for it to run out. So it's basically going to peel away and peel away and peel away, and it's going to drive itself away from the cut. But I think for our purposes that'll work just fine. And if I wanted to make this a little lighter, of course I could shave the sides down the same way, and then you get more of a, so you can kind of shape the hammerhead how you want it. The next thing you need to do is decide how big of a hammerhead you want. Now, the bigger the hammerhead is, and I think this should go without saying, the heavier this mallet's going to be. So if you're looking for a heavy mallet, you may want to go ahead and have like a big long section like this, like 10 inches, and that'll give you a lot of weight that this thing can pull around with it. But then it's kind of a one-trick pony. It's just for beating on stuff. I'm going to make this a slightly lighter deal, and that way this edge will look a little flatter too. Now the general idea here is pretty simple to get across, but maybe not readily obvious. What you want to do is cut you a little notch, and that little flat side actually helps me stabilize this too, but it's going to become a problem in a minute. So figure out how big your head's going to be. I think I'm going to do mine about, how big is that? It's about 6 inches down from the top part, so maybe 5 inches down on the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut me a little groove and just line up on this where I'm about perpendicular and give it a whack, or 5. And what that's going to do is it's going to start me a little notch. Okay, and now I'm going to follow this notch basically all the way around. So go a little that way. Go a little this way. Now how deep you want to make this is up to you. If you go too deep, you're going to risk splitting this thing out, but on a log this size, it's really not going to be that big of a problem. And then boop, stay on kind of our parallel line. And just work our way all the way around it and carve ourselves a little notch. Now when you're going around something like this in a circle, you're going to tend to get off square really easy. So I'm trying to sort of work it from both sides a little bit and keep an eye on like where I'm off. So I'm coming off this way, so this is going to have to come down a little bit. And now I came down too far, so that's, too far is fine, too far can be fixed. Not like that though. Okay, so let's go in there, which is right in line with this, so that's good. And my axe head on this hatchet is pretty loose, so I may end up losing this guy today if I keep beating on it like this, but that'll just give me an excuse to make a new handle. Now this little basher here is pretty light also, so obviously I can't be putting too much force into these swings, but this works. And then instead of beating on the pole of your axe with a piece of metal which will flare it out, you've got something to hit it. Now if you don't already have one made and you're out in the bush, you can just use any log that's laying around, or a piece of firewood that you've already cut, maybe like this. And this is half rotten, so this is going to be messy, but just line that up there, and you know, it's a little more time consuming, but it's just as effective. I would pick a lighter log if you can, rather than a heavy one. because even with this little light thing, I mean, I can get a good swing on it and pop a little notch in here and we're good to go. Okay, so now I've got my notch run all the way around the log, and it's not perfectly straight. It's a little squared off this way, that way, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you wanted to, you could start peeling this right now. But what I'm going to do is actually try and chip this guy out a little bit. So I'm just going to go around this notch, and on the handle side, okay, I'm going to take away some of this extra wood. This is an optional step, but it allows you to dig a little deeper into the notch by going around again, basically, and then you can remove more wood the second time around. Because if I start splitting this out now, I'm going to have pieces like this to snap off of it, and then there's a chance of running that out into the head, and I don't want to do that because that would just embarrass me. And also, when you're notching or doing any kind of fine work with a hatchet, if you use the beard of the hatchet, you tend to deliver a little bit more of a stronger blow. So you don't have to swing as hard, and that means a little bit more fine control of where you're landing this thing. And then you'll see when I'm finishing, I'll actually use the same trick on the end here to kind of, I'll just show you now, to kind of get in here and just sort of round off the top a little bit so it's not as likely to split out up there. I'll do that usually at the end though when I'm done making the thing, so if I break it I haven't put that much time into it. Where am I at? So there's the little notch cut all the way around. Coolsies. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around that little knock again, and as you can see in the video, that notch isn't very big. It's maybe an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch all the way around. So I want to take off a little more wood than that because this is a pretty big chunk. So I want to be removing, when I start hewing this thing down from the bottom, I want to be taking off as much wood as I possibly can to get rid of it and use the least amount of energy possible. So now I'm really going to go into whaling on it because I've got that relief cut, so I don't have to worry about this thing popping loose as much on me now. And this is a fairly stout piece of oak, so I'm not too worried about it breaking in half on me. And now that axe is really starting to dig in. Alrighty, and if that hasn't given you some ideas, I mean, if you're at this level of bushcraft where you need to watch a video on this, that should be giving you a lot of ideas right there. So this technique is actually useful for squaring off log ends if you need to. This is also useful for making mortise and tenon joints. The other part of the joint, that's another story, but at least making a little peg or squaring something down. And you can do this on this scale with a log. You can do it with a red bud tree that's, you know, 16 feet around like they used to do in the old days. It basically works. And once you've got your notch carved, then as you continue to chop in at an angle on that bottom piece, you're furthering that notch along without really removing too much material from here, because it's acting as a stop for the axe. And that's exactly what we're going to use it for now. So we've got our little head on there, which looks actually kind of cool. So now the next step is to carve the handle. Now I could sit here all day and do this kind of number and hew off wood to get this thing straight. I'm not going to do that because it takes too freaking long. If you can, try to stand this up somewhere. It'll make this process a little easier. It's not exactly essential. You want to get an idea how big your handle is down there on the bottom though, and kind of make about the same size on the top. Now on this piece of wood, you can't see it in the video probably, but the heartwood in here is a different color. It's a little darker, and this is really dry and cracked up. It's still heavy, so it's probably going to continue to crack on me. But again, this is a single bushcraft thing. So anyways, I'm going to use the center of this heartwood as like a gauge, because that's maybe a little bit bigger than what I actually want for a handle. But I'm going to go ahead and square this off. So I'm going to start with my squared off side here. That way my handle's in line with what I'm doing. I'm going to go here to the edge of the heartwood, and I'm going to try to see if I can knock me a little block off. And this is actually going to be quite a large block. So I'm basically just splitting the log down like you would any ordinary log. And there's a knot in here. So that's going to be fun. What do you think you're doing? You see me bashing with dangerous tools, and then you just climb up here? Get out of here. So, Houston, we have problem number one. There's a knot in this log, which is going to make this a little more work than it normally is. But that's okay. Ugh, I should have brought more axe to this party. Alright, and now my axe is stuck. And that's not going to pry loose. So, I'm going to go ahead and back that guy out of there. And we'll go at this again. Try and get it at least started, and then maybe we can wedge him out. Alrighty. Well, we got him started. So now, let me use another little, do I want to do that? Might be a bit much for this video, but basically, once you've got a split started, you don't want to mess this thing up, and I'm out here jacking with it. I'm going to grab a wedge real quick. So another little woodcraft tool that I tend to use a lot are wedges, and I basically just cut these in the same manner that I'm doing this. Just with the axe, I go and hew down the sides. Actually, these are more hewing and less splitting, but they do come in incredibly handy for this kind of thing, because you can actually get the rest of that board to rip open. You can also use another axe as a wedge and just kind of get it in there and do what you're going to do with it. But that's the basic idea. You split the wood down, and it's going to come down, and it's going to use that stop to your advantage, and then you're going to have your piece just basically fall off on the ground. So now it should be a little easier to do these other pieces, the remaining sides. But I'm going to do the hard side first. And pardon me for being in your view, but I do it from, where can I do this from? You need to stand up straighter. Just take that and throw it back under there. There we go. Alrighty. Just to kind of shore that up a little bit. And we'll go to the other side. It'd actually be easier to come in on the sides, but for reasons I'm not going to go into, I don't want to do that. Actually, I will go into it. I like doing the hard work first and getting it out the way. So once you got your axe started in there, that sucker's stuck. You don't need a prop anymore. And that's how they should fall off if you don't have a knot in your log. And just peel that joker away. And that heartwood looks really bad. What happened to this tree? Before I happened to it. looks like part of the heartwood here is maybe rotted out, so this might not last very long, but oh well. Get some sunshine on it and see what it'll do. And then we can do the next part. Now you can see, hopefully, by this point, how much easier this is, you sorry little ingrates, than hewing this whole thing off bit by bit. Like splitting it off, or reeving it off as it's called, is kind of a simpler, gentler process. Where's my basher at? Now, line that guy up and get him to dig. Reeving's more better. And sometimes my axe will hit sideways like this, and all I do is, I've got the pole of the axe sticking out, so I just go ahead and follow that joker all the way down like that. Works pretty effectively. And we got one more side to go. Doom, doom, doom. Yep. Now it's straight. Stay still. And looks pretty cool, right? So now the next part of this process is of course going to be the normal boring, hewing part, but since you've removed so much material, you've got squared off ends now, the hewing part is actually pretty simple. And because these are dug in the way they are, you can actually get a lot of wood slowed off because you're digging on a corner instead of digging on a flat face. So hopefully I'm not lying to you and this won't take very long at all. Oop, broke my head. And I tore a little chunk out over here because I wasn't being careful, but that happens. And what I'm doing with the hewing is basically pulling off these little splits like this every inch or so, or a couple inches. And then when I come back through on my big swings, then I don't have to swing as hard, and the chips just basically come flying off of the thing. Come on, make a liar out of me. Because the harder you swing, the better your chance of chopping your head like I did a minute ago. And that's basically, the rest of this process is basically going to be shaving this down to where it's about the size that, however big you want it to be for your hand. And for your particular mallet, I mean, it's a custom tuned instrument, so I can give you measurements that I use. But I tend to have big hands compared to a lot of people, so probably wisest not to go off my measurements. And if you want to, you can go ahead and leave that little bevel on there at the top, or however you want to do it. I mean, it's your mallet, so whatever you want to do to make it look cool, as long as it works. And now I'm basically just working my way down the other direction, down to the end here, and kind of rounding off the bottom too as I go, because that's what I like to do. So, one consideration you want to take into account when you're starting this and you're actually splitting off, you want to remove as much material as you can, but you also want to leave enough room that you can kind of smooth this out. And so think of that square as like something that's just way too big for your hand, but you could still grab it and theoretically use it. And then you'll shave it down to like the mold where your hand will fit. That's one way to think about it anyway. And another thing I'm doing while I'm hewing this is kind of straightening it, because it was a little bent, so I'm trying to even it out a little bit more. But I'm not perfect at hewing, and I don't know anybody who is. Hewing wood is not some burly process where you're just whacking away at it full swing. I mean, there is a little bit of technique to it, and you'll learn it through doing stuff like this, where you'll get better at it, and you can kind of use it as a gentle shaping tool, or a rough shaping tool rather, for actually doing quite fine work if you really want to get into the spring of it. I kind of want to leave it fatter on this way. So. Try them out. Still a little too much on this side. That side's good. But the technique is the same. You basically chop in about as much as you want to remove, and then just slow it off with some shallower, heavier swings. I actually roughed out a little spoon by doing just this. And that little bit that you see me at the end, again, I'm just using the beard of the axe and kind of cross-cutting it a little to chip it down. And then when it's done, I'll do the same thing on this end. I'll probably leave my squared end, well, fuck it, squared end, you're going down. And it also helps if you kind of go in at an angle, so you're not coming straight down on it, just kind of at an angle across. And probably you won't get it perfect your first time. I still don't get it perfect, and I don't really care as long as I just kind of nip these weak points off the top where it's prone to start splitting out. So I'm probably creating more weak points than I'm making, but you see, you just sort of round off the top a little bit. That makes it a little bit nicer. And if you really want to keep it from splitting out, another thing you can do is actually wrap the top and bottom with parachute cord or any kind of cordage that you have available. As long as you're striking in the middle and not on the cord itself, that'll kind of help it keep it from splaying out and splitting as much on the ends. Same thing if you were to turn it sideways like this and try and mount it on a handle. If you wrap the ends that aren't being directly hit to kind of hold all the fibers together, you wrap them nice and tight. Take some wet paracord or wet rawhide and wrap it around there real solid, and then just sure up those lines and let it dry to where it squeezes down when it tightens on it, and you get a good. But I mean, this guy right now, I got to remove a little bit more right here, but that is a heavy basher right there, and it came out of a pretty heavy chunk of wood, so Again, this, if I would have made this full-on basher down here, this thing would feel like a club in my hand and it'd be too heavy to wield. Now as it dries out, it's going to lose some weight, but I'd say this is hitting with the force of about a 5-pound mallet right now, which is more than what I really need. But you can always shave it down more later too. So if you err on the side of making it a little too heavy, then that's what you done. Just go ahead and shave it down a little bit, just like this, but on the head. And that's not exactly even, but you know what? It works for a one-trick pony. I could still slim this down a little on the sides, make it a little more where I can kind of grip it up higher and do some finer work. But as heavy as this thing is, I'd rather use my little basher for finer work and use this guy for some heavier stuff. So that's how you do it. That's how you make them. It's fairly simple. Sorry the video was so long. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to see more, just go ahead and click subscribe, because I'm going to be here doing this for a while. I'll live out here, so that's my thing. I mean, that whole project took maybe, I don't know, an hour. So, yeah, it's not a lot to it. And then you got a basher.